Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Band Rants channel, your home for NFL projections, predictions, and of course, your periodic rant. Now, I don't usually do videos on breaking head coach hires unless it's a really big deal. And to be honest, this one is. This was one of my predictions in the offseason, not necessarily Doug Pederson himself, but that at least one former head coach is picked up by one of these teams looking for a head coach. So, this was actually the move that just broke tonight. Doug Pederson being signed by the Jaguars. I'm going to break this down and talk about why it's a good thing and maybe why it's not such a good thing, more so good. But before I do, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and we'll go ahead and start. So, this news just broke over the last 10-20 minutes, probably longer by the time you see this video, but essentially, Doug Pederson, the former Philadelphia Eagles head coach. The Philadelphia Eagles head coach, by the way, that brought the Eagles from worst to first to win it all in his second season. A head coach that, in my opinion, his last year in Philadelphia was riddled with scandals. And you know what? The ironic thing about this is, had it not been for some questionable play calling in the Jags and Patriots AFC Championship game, Pederson could have been playing the Jaguars in that Super Bowl, and that would have been very interesting. But anyway, Doug Pederson going to Jacksonville, this one is not necessarily a surprise in terms of Pederson getting hired somewhere, but maybe by Jacksonville because Byron Leftwich was considered a frontrunner, and the frontrunner. But much like Jim Harbaugh in Minnesota, when they made decisions, Leftwich and Harbaugh made decisions to not take that job and not go in that direction, Jacksonville had to improvise elsewhere, and Doug Pederson is a good option, especially when you have Trevor Lawrence, a first overall pick, and Doug Pederson, he's got experience with quarterbacks of this caliber. I mean, Carson Wentz was a second overall pick, which is, the next best thing, but in his second season, I believe it was the second season, Doug Pederson, had Carson Wentz playing at an MVP type level. And you could argue that Frank Reich probably gets more of the credit in that sense, but that also goes to Pederson because he does know how to bring in the right coordinators. And he is an Andy Reid disciple. He knows a little bit, or a thing or two, about getting the best out of quarterbacks. I mean, even Jalen Hurts was looking okay in his rookie season, had some shine under Pederson for them to consider that he was the guy for them and is the guy going forward. But this is a match that's good for Trevor Lawrence because this is a coach that has gone to the big dance and won it all, and now he goes to a Jacksonville team that I would hope would be big players in free agency. They've got a lot of draft stock, but the only bad thing is that the GM, Trent Baalke, is just a complete train wreck. And this is a lot of reasons why a lot of head coaches didn't want to take this job. And the Jags are lucky that they were able to get Doug Pederson because Baalke is just awful. I mean, I could make an entire video on why he sucks, but I don't want this to seem too much like a smear, but I do have to cover it a little bit. The Jaguars cannot afford another offseason like last year. They need to actually be proactive, and I'm hoping Doug Pederson pushes more for that than maybe Urban Meyer did. I think Urban Meyer, the glamour of being in the NFL, might have overshined all the mistakes that Jacksonville made, even though it's not really his fault. But hopefully Pederson has more of a say on the overall roster and moves that Jacksonville plans on making, because if not, and we let Trent Baalke, drive the car again, he'll probably drive it off a cliff again. So hopefully, that being said, if this team has the right offseason and Doug Pederson works his magic and brings in the right coordinators to help Trevor Lawrence build, to make the defense look really good again. I mean, remember, he had Jim Schwartz in Philadelphia, and his defense looked really good with Schwartz. So you can argue that he does know how to pick some good coordinators. I can't stress that enough, and that's a big, big deal for a team like Jacksonville that is drafting first overall for the second year in a row. They had a lot of problems that were really sort of, overseen mainly because of Urban Meyer's scandals, but there's a lot more than just that. They were a disaster before Urban Meyer, and hopefully they won't be a disaster after Urban Meyer. And yes, Trent Baalke should be fired, but I don't think that's the direction they're going in right now. So hopefully Pederson can, at the very least, make at least one side of the ball shine more than it did the last couple of years, which is not hard to do considering you have Trevor Lawrence, considering that you have a couple of pieces on the defense that you can work with. But do I see Pederson being like a Super Bowl coach with Jacksonville next year? I'm not going to say that. Absolutely not. But I do see Jacksonville improving, even if it is by only a couple of games. I mean, if you want to get technical, they improved this year by a game and a half, which isn't saying much. But I still do think they can improve to at least 5 or 6 wins at a minimum next year, as long as Balky doesn't drop the ball again, as long as Doug Pederson brings in the right coordinators and he's able to bring the most out of that roster. I mean, this is going to be a really, really interesting development, and I'm very excited to see I'm excited to see what Trevor Lawrence does, because, in year 2, we know that he didn't exactly have the best first year, but I saw enough out of him in year 1. That final game against the Colts, I saw him play his best football and go out on a high note. And that gives me a lot of hope for year 2. And I think Doug Pederson is somebody that can really build on that talent and build on that development. Now, the AFC South, you can argue long-term is not going to be competitive. I mean, Ryan Tannehill is over 30 years old. Carson Wentz is, hit or miss. The Texans don't even have a team. So you could argue Jacksonville, Doug Pederson, excuse me, how am I doing, is in a really good spot to potentially overtake that division in, I'd say, 2 to 3 years, because I do still think Tennessee, it's theirs to lose. I think the Colts are still a contender, but I also think Jacksonville is going to be a team that can slowly rise from the ashes. I mean, they've gone from worst to first and almost went to the Super Bowl a few years ago, and Pederson's got experience in doing that. So again, we'll see what happens. This is obviously great news for Jacksonville. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.